Every August, something happens to Honeybrook. For most of the year, it's a quiet crossroads town in the rolling ranch country south of Redmont. But when the fair comes, the whole county comes with it. The Honeybrook County Fair grew out of the land itself. Cattle ranchers had settled these hills in the decades after the Civil War, and every summer they gathered to trade livestock, to compete, to see who had the best roping arm and the steadiest horse. What began as neighbors showing off on a Saturday afternoon became, in time, the event that defined the year. The rodeo formalized. Permanent grandstands went up, livestock judging, harvest exhibits, a midway that ran till midnight. By the 1930s, riders were coming from across the state to compete. By the 1940s, Honeybrook's rodeo had a reputation that reached well beyond the county line. The fairgrounds sit on the south side of town, but make no mistake, they're what put Honeybrook on the map. 1 week a year, Honeybrook isn't a small town anymore. It's the center of everything.
Welcome back to Redmont. Just going to take a quick look here at what was built in the last episode, our little Chinatown district, although it's down there by the bridge, can't really see it closely here. And we're going to very quickly fly off here to where we're going to be starting our new town location, the town of Honeybrook. We're going to be building it down at this location right down here. First thing I'm going to do is take a look at the terrain, and what I want to do here is I want to smooth out some of the humps and bumps, but I don't really want to erase the slope too much, but I just want to smooth it out a little bit so make it a little easier to build on. Building on slopes in Cities Skylines 2 is always a challenge, as I've learned many times, but also you don't want to completely erase elevations and slopes because that just smooths out all the interesting bits of the town as well. So you have to work with it, find something that actually is a good compromise. Smooth out the highway a little bit here. I'm going to use constant slope and just smooth out this little curve here, make this a little more consistent. And just flatten out the terrain, make sure it's all smoothed out again. For our main street, I want to run this parallel to the highway. Connect it back up to the highway. And this intersection here is going to cause me all kinds of grief later on in the episode. Make our cross street. And very quickly the roads are going to start conforming to the terrain. It's very hilly around here, so they're not going to run off on a grid forever. For the town proper, for Honeybrook, I don't want this isn't really the main focus of the build. It's obviously going to be our fairgrounds. The town itself is a bit more backdrop. Not going to be overly complicated. I do want to make sure I try to pick appropriate style buildings. This time I'm going to try a couple of from the UK set. We don't want too many of them, but a couple of them I think they look fine. We're also going to be using this Australian little clinic or hospital here. pretty quirky looking. I think it suits our Western vibe fairly well. Some of Smiley's assets here. These are very nice. The rest of the building is going to be pretty nondescript. There's really nothing about this town that stands out. It's really the fair that is the attraction, not the town. We're going to have a motel, fast food restaurant. And I'm just going to be using mostly, I think, the northeast and southwest pack assets here to fill out the rest of it. It's pretty generic looking 2 to 3 story buildings. And once I have the main street down, I'll start filling in the grid around it. It's not going to be a very large grid for streets with sidewalks. There's not going to be very many of them. We're quickly going to downgrade into alleyways for most of the streets. I'm going to try some of the old town North American buildings here. Some of them look a little bit too much like New Orleans, but some of them, like these ones right down here, these ones look a little more Western, so I think we can get away with this. And we're going to sprinkle in a few modern buildings, like a modern grocery store. I found this really cool little Norwegian church. Nice little wooden church asset here, wood building. But we're going to get rid of the graveyard here. I don't really want that. But yeah, that's a really nice little church. Going to go with the vanilla fire station. It fits the style of this town quite nicely. And now I'm going to spend a bit of time filling in the residential houses that surround the town. This was asked a couple times in the last episode. I do apologize. Because of my non-standard monitor setup, I have to crop the video. A lot of the information panels are being cropped off on the sides here, so you can't see them. For this, all I'm using here is Find It. And what I'm doing in Find It is I'm setting for type of building and lot sizes. These are mostly either 3x4 or 3x5. I think they're all Southwest assets. And then I'm using Control R to cycle through them to select the buildings as I go. Keep in mind, this is sped up. The video is sped up just a little bit here for time. So it is a little faster looking than it actually is in reality, but it's still a very convenient way to find the buildings you want and then be able to cycle through them, so you're not constantly having to go back to pick from the Find It tool. And I'm going to be drawing in a bunch of back roads here. The back roads are going to be following the terrain. There's lots of ravines and small valleys. The houses are going to be fairly far apart, spaced far apart here. A rural location, they would have fairly large properties. I'm going to come back in later and edit out the grass and the fences and the hedges and all that to make it a little more suitable. Going with a small elementary school. We're not going to be using a high school here. There's not really enough population to warrant a high school. And just expand the grid out just a little bit more. Honeybrook is going to be a bit more focused on cattle ranching, although around the town, immediately around the town, it's going to be just basic farming. Thank you for the viewer who suggested the name Honeybrook. I'm going to need a lot of names for small towns for this particular build. There's a lot of tiny little places I need to build. I'm going to be adding a few agricultural assets here too. This is an agricultural town, so that obviously makes sense. That makes a lot of sense to have agricultural buildings, so I'm going to hand place those. I'm going to be hand placing a little bit of industry. This is light industry. I don't want any smokestacks or anything like that over here. South of Honeybrook, I have this expansive area down here. This is where all the cattle ranches are going to be located eventually. I'm not going to get to those in this episode. I don't really need the resources. This little connection here where it connects back up to the highway. This might be an interesting little connection for a small little town site. Once again, anybody have any ideas for town names? I'm all ears. Okay, for our main attraction, our county fair, we're going to be using the farmer's market asset here. It almost looks like a midway, so it's perfect. And I'm going to be just flattening out this hill here a little bit, make a little more space. For the carnival rides, that sort of stuff, we don't have proper assets for that quite yet. We do have some amusement park rides. I'm just going to use one as a kind of a centerpiece for it. I'm going to be using some static assets here. This is like a park asset, although I'm not really happy with the roofs that are actually grass. This is from the park maintenance building. It's a static asset. It's the garage, I believe. And I'm just going to splice two of them together to create an exhibition hall for all those arts and crafts that are jams and jellies and pickles and all that sort of stuff. Of course, we're going to need parking. We will need some exhibition halls for livestock exhibitions. We're going to use these agricultural buildings. I'll come back and recolor them so that it's appropriate. For the amusement park rides, we do have static assets for these. Just the only issue is we don't have a huge variety of them. So if more amusement park rides come up in the future, I'll add them to the park. For the arena for the Rodeo stadium, I did a little bit of research, and I will say a little bit. I didn't go into huge depth over it, but my understanding is it's about approximately half the size of a football stadium. And hey, what a coincidence, we have half a football stadium as a decal here. So I'm going to use this as a guide. I'm also going to be adding some bleachers for the audience to watch the rodeo from. This will get in the way as I go here, so what I'm going to do is go trace it out with a net lane over top, and then I will delete out the pedestrian path underneath it. I have to raise the bleachers up because there'll be a fence around everything, so they have to be raised up so people can actually watch the rodeo. Because of that, I need some sort of railing or so people don't fall off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to embed a leisure pier here into the side. And this works quite well. And because we're raised up a little bit here, I'm going to add some stairs to the backside here, so there's an indication of how people get up into the bleachers. Of course, we don't have proper assets for a rodeo, so I have to make do with what we have. What I'm basically going to be doing here is just making an approximation. Hopefully I'm getting most of the major elements. There's the entrance points for the riders and the bulls and all that. These are referred to as chutes. There's two different types. There is the bucking chute and the roping chute. What I'm building right down here, this is the roping chute area. They are located on opposite ends of the arena area. And on this end, this will be where the bucking chutes will be. I imagine this to be the expensive seating where the VIP sitting is. It's a little higher up and sitting directly above where the bucking chutes will be located. I have to Mickey Mouse together some things here to make it look appropriate, so we need some stair access. Obviously I can't get rid of the railings on the leisure piers here, so we'll just have to live with that. And I'm just going to raise this stadium seating up a little bit higher here, so it's sitting above the arena area. Of course, for the chutes, we don't have anything appropriate in game here, so I have to make something up. I found these garage port doors from the Japanese set. I think with these, I'm able to make fairly convincing looking chutes. You know, of course, they are just approximations, but I think from a distance, I think they read appropriate. Bit of recolor, delete out sully surfaces here. Those are just used as guide. For the bucking chutes, the orientation for these are slightly different. They open from the side, so we're going to build them as such. And recolor them to match. For the bucking chutes, the riders need to be able to get onto the horse or the bull, so we have these little raised platforms in the back. Going to be creating some holding pens. There would probably be holding pens on both sides. I'm just going to create them on the roping chute end of the arena area here. couple barns. I'm just going to point this out. I'm having issues with my back roads here. The outside taxis want to really use it all the time. I think it's like pathing behavior of the taxis themselves, so I'll have to figure out a way to minimize that because it doesn't look very realistic at all. I got the idea that attached to the fairgrounds would be a speedway. Now this is pretty old school. It's just a racing oval. It's nothing big. It's nothing major. I don't really know a lot about car racing, so I'm not going to get crazy with this or try to make something a bit outside my skill set. For me, it's not really in my wheelhouse. But I thought for a country fair, my first thought was like monster truck rallies, but we don't really have assets for monster truck rallies. So I thought I'd go a little more old school and create a little area for a demolition derby in the middle of the speedway here. I'm using the hay bales as the bumpers for it. And I'm just going to use some surfaces here to connect everything together. Recolor the concrete barriers so they look a little more like a racetrack. I'm also using Mike Build's net lane surface over the road here to give it a little more of an age look. And some static buildings here, just to some buildings associated with the racetrack. These could be concession stands or offices or something for when there's races going on. I know nothing about racetracks, so I am just building what seems appropriate. I'm probably making all sorts of mistakes here, but obviously we need an entrance point for people to get onto the track itself. So I'm just at one end here, point where people can get on. I'm pretty sure none of that's appropriate, and I'm sure people are going to correct me, but that's okay. Also with the fairgrounds and the rodeo, there'd be judging areas. So this little round area down here, they'd be judging horses and cattle and probably sheep or something like that. This is pretty makeshift in here. I was imagining a platform for the judges to watch the competition from. I didn't really finish it. I didn't really know what I was trying to build here, so it's a bit haphazard. Behind the livestock exhibition hall, so it's going to be some outdoor pens. People could walk through these exhibition halls. There would be pens inside full of all sorts of farm animals, from pigs to sheep to chickens, what have you. So I'll come back and detail that a little later in the episode. Right now I'm going to start adding the farmlands surrounding. There's going to be a kind of a farmlands and some rural residential properties surrounding Honeybrook. I thought this would be a good location to include the dairy, which for some reason the game isn't, the business in it is not a dairy, it's a fish stick factory, which, okay, sometimes the logic of this game really, I don't know, sometimes. I'm going to expand it a little bit. We're going to be making it a modern dairy, so I'm going to be including some cattle sheds as well. And just more farmland around the town itself. off the main highway, there will be like small pockets of residential houses and buildings scattered about. Some different assets here. These are some of the Japanese buildings. They're flat one-story buildings for the most part. We're not ever going to come in and look very closely at any of this, so if it's not 100%, that doesn't really matter too much. It's always just going to be seen at a bit of a distance. Trying to place a few of the houses on slightly different elevations. I like to do a lot of, for my cinematics, I like to do a lot of fly-throughs, and having things at different elevations, it really does make it look like a real place. I'm going to be recoloring the lawns here to something a little more appropriate for the drier environment. I will also be filling in some of the areas between the houses with greener grass. Trying a little bit of an experiment here with this particular town. Just trying to blend the map surface a little better with the town itself, so there's a bit of a transition between the two. Of course, for our downtown areas, we will be filling in the blank surfaces with paved surfaces. I'll be using custom surfaces on top of the farms here. Let's move on to some of the more finer detailing I'm going to be doing. First thing I'm going to be detailing out here will be the Speedway. For inner arena area here, I'm just going to be stacking up some dirt surfaces. What I've noticed over time, I've accumulated a lot of like surfaces and different decals, like surface decals and all that sort of stuff, and I only use a fraction of them usually. A good thing to do a lot of times is just do a bit of experimenting, mix and match new things, see if you can come up with something that looks good. This is a bit of a failed experiment in here. I don't really like how that turned out. For the gravel areas, I'm using the oil industry surfaces. It's kind of like a base coat, like the base surfaces. And then on top of that, I use the Real Vision decals here to add all the texture and detail to that surface. And the reason I went with a demolition derby is we have the junk cars from the Muscle Garage set. That's the closest thing we have to demolition cars. It'd be nice if we had proper ones, but these will do for now. I could have done this with the line tool, just to offset the setting and randomize this a little bit, make it look a little more haphazard, but I have to come back in here and just add a few more bales of hay and just make it look a little messier. At some point, the bases for the bleachers disappeared. Now I have to come up with a makeshift solution to hide that using these concrete slabs. I'm not going to show much of this. This is fixing an issue that propped up after the fact. I have to do that to all of them. For the surfaces for the rodeo itself, same process as I used for the Speedway. I'm just going to mix and match some surfaces here until I get something that I think looks appropriate. This would be fairly, obviously bare dirt and not exactly mud, but it's a very dirty area down here. I got this smart idea here to try to draw in hangout areas in the holding pens and then put animal spawners in here. I was hoping to get horses to spawn in here. This didn't quite work as intended. What I actually ended up with was some Lovecraftian horrors standing in these pens. So unfortunately, not enough space for this. It would be nice if it just would spawn like 1 or 2 horses. That would be perfect, but nope, it's gonna spawn a whole bunch of them. Just behind the rodeo, we're going to have an unloading area for all the animals and the equipment and all that sort of stuff. And go through the same process of layering up surfaces here to blend everything together. We don't have proper livestock trailers here, so I'm just going to be using some semi-trucks. This could be for unloading of anything from the rodeo to perhaps maybe even the county fair as well. Right around the Speedway, it made some sense to add some of these muscle cars from the Muscle Car Garage set. For our judging arena here, there is enough room to put in a hangout area and a little horse spawner, so I'm going to do that. There is enough area behind the livestock exhibition halls here to add some holding pens with actual animals, but we're going to go with like pigs and chickens and sheep and that sort of stuff. For this farmers markets asset, it's obviously way too cluttered, just like most of Cities Skylines 2 assets, so we're going to do a bit of editing here, get rid of some of this stuff. I'm going to be replacing some of the surfaces. This area down here seemed perfect for an outdoor stage. I didn't add any of Sully's citizens, like his citizen props here. I had an issue with them a little earlier on where they bugged out and really corrupted a save, so I'm a bit hesitant to use them, although I will admit it would look a lot better if I did add them. Line the park area with some trees. And of course we need more parking. Because I have this concrete wall now where there wasn't one before, I'm just going to add some signage here to hide it a little bit, or at least blend it in a little bit. So just picking stuff that felt appropriate for a fairground, like fish on a stick and donuts seemed like an obvious choice. For the amusement park rides, ideally what this would just be one gigantic empty parking lot, and it'd be like a traveling amusement park that would come in for 2 weeks out of the year, set up in the parking lot, and then tear everything down. Can't really do that. We don't really have the assets for it. If we ever do get the assets, I'll definitely come back in here and add them. This is more of a temporary solution until I can figure out a better solution for it. Now I'll spend some time detailing out some of the surfaces around some of our industrial areas. For the most part, Honeybrook isn't going to be a very high detailed area. For the dairy farm, make it look more like a proper dairy farm. These aren't particularly nice areas. Most of the cows don't spend any time outdoors, although I will put some spawners out here so we can see some cows. But for the most part, dairy cows spend their entire lives in their milking sheds and rarely have ever come out of them. I'm going to be using some net lanes to cover up the vanilla gravel roads. It's something that looks a little nicer. Here's where I'm going to start my attempt to blend the landscape of the city to the natural terrain around it. I'm going to expand some of the green areas out into the hillsides here. Just get an idea of what it looks like from road level as we approach the town. I wanted to create some custom billboards for this sign, for a particular business. These are the support pillars from the leisure piers. You could isolate them as their own separate asset. They interact with the ground, so they have to stay this height. I can't sink them into the ground, which is unfortunate. And I'm just going to use them to create my own billboard, finding a signage here that seems appropriate. Strong arm mixing, sure, why not? Seems like a business that would be out in some little rural community. And it's the same sort of detailing technique I've been using throughout the rest of the map here, just layering up surfaces and decals to build it up until I get something that I'm happy with. Bushes and trees and shrubs and that sort of stuff it's a nice framing device, so you can, like, almost like a fence but not quite. It also gives a bit of visual height. Also, trees and bushes and shrubs, they indicate age in a very subtle way. In order for those things to grow, they take years, so it gives you kind of a clue as to how long some of these buildings might have been around for. You can see here the traffic is starting to build up at this particular intersection. Sometimes the game mechanics don't make a lot of sense. Why all of a sudden all this traffic needed to come out to Honeybrook, I'm not really sure. It's not people moving in, the town's already been here for some time. I'm not really sure what's happening here. It becomes quite distracting and quite the mess. It backs up all the way along the highway here. Eventually what I do, and I do this off camera, is I add the mod for traffic light management and add some split phasing in there, which seemed to fix some of the issue. Right along the highway here, of course, seems like a perfect location for a trailer park. And I'll be moving these and removing some of the props in the back here to make this a little more appropriate or fit a little better into the space. see there, the traffic is just really getting crazy. What I'm doing here is I'm intentionally using the trees as a framing device. I'm using them to break up the edges of the green grass from the brown, like the drier grass. So there's a nicer transition. But I'm also using the contour lines on the map here to determine where to actually put the trees. I am making sure to keep them in the nooks and crannies, the little gullies and valleys area. This might not be the height of realism, but what this does is it actually allows you now to be able to see the actual landscape. From a distance, it looks really flat and uninteresting, but adding all these bushes and such to all these little dips and valleys, like what I'm doing in here, you see how I'm just following the terrain lines. This all of a sudden allows you to be able to actually see the terrain, and you can see the results here, right? It was brought up in the episode where I was building Willard that every little tiny town in this part of the United States seems to have a junkyard. It's very true. There was a tiny one in Willard, but I think we'll be a bit more direct here in Honeybrook and make an actual scrapyard. I need to figure out ways to speed up my detailing. I enjoy doing it, but it also is like a lot of work. So any way I could just make the process a little quicker, I'm going to try exploring some of those options. These are sheds from the Ports and Bridges DLC, the fish industry. These are quite nice. A little more variety for that sort of stuff. For the oil surfaces, like the oil industry surface here, a lot of the other surfaces don't seem to draw on top of it, but Sully's riverbed textures certainly seem to work. Just a couple of real vision decals here just to blend the surfaces together, make it less than perfect. This actually was really fast to build, to be honest. It didn't take much time at all. Once again, it's not meant to be looked at close up, it's just meant to be seen from a bit of a distance. And a few more surface decals here just to blend some of the surfaces. Some of these rural properties be much larger than the standard lot sizes you get with the vanilla game. So I'm just going to use surfaces and trees and stuff to frame them to give a suggestion of where property lines might be for these properties. Of course, we need a billboard sign for our rodeo. And I'm going to be adding another one here for our Speedway. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around to the very end. I do appreciate everybody who watches the entire video. It really does mean a lot. I will see everybody in the next episode. Until next week, take care.